Welcome to Dream Tale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is The Interpreter Who Knew Too Much. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. The Interpreter Who Knew Too Much begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. The Interpreter Who Knew Too Much. Marina Chen had always possessed an extraordinary gift for languages. By the age of 32, she could speak 15 languages fluently, ranging from the major world languages like English, Mandarin, Spanish, and Arabic, to more obscure ones like Finnish, Swahili, and Georgian. Her ability to switch between languages with perfect pronunciation and cultural nuance had made her one of the most sought-after interpreters in the international diplomatic community. Her journey into the world of languages had begun quite accidentally during her childhood in San Francisco, where her parents ran a small international grocery store in a diverse neighborhood. Young Marina would spend hours after school helping customers from different countries, naturally absorbing their languages and customs. What started as a practical skill for helping her parents' business eventually became her life's passion. After completing her master's degree in International Relations and Linguistics at Georgetown University, Marina had worked for various international organizations, including the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and several embassies. She had interpreted for presidents, prime ministers, business tycoons, and even a few celebrities who needed discreet translation services during their international ventures. However, nothing in her extensive career had prepared her for the assignment she received in late September. The Global Climate and Economic Summit was scheduled to take place in Geneva, Switzerland, bringing together representatives from 47 nations to discuss critical issues ranging from climate change and renewable energy to international trade agreements and cybersecurity protocols. The conference would last for 5 days, and Marina had been selected as one of the 12 senior interpreters who would work in the main assembly hall. The selection was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. The decisions made at this summit could potentially affect billions of people worldwide, and accurate interpretation would be crucial for ensuring that all parties understood each other correctly. Marina felt the weight of this responsibility as she boarded her flight to Geneva, reviewing her notes on technical terminology in various languages. The conference center was an impressive modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Lake Geneva and the Alps beyond. The main assembly hall was designed like an amphitheater, with semicircular rows of seats descending toward a central podium. Each delegate had a desk equipped with headphones, microphones, and voting buttons for formal decisions. Above the hall, soundproof interpretation booths were positioned like theater boxes, each one assigned to a different language pair. Marina's primary responsibility was interpreting between English and Mandarin, but her knowledge of multiple other languages meant she would occasionally be called upon to assist with other language combinations when needed. She arrived at the conference center 2 days early for technical briefings and to familiarize herself with the venue and equipment. During the preliminary meetings, Marina met her fellow interpreters, a diverse group of linguistic experts from around the world. There was Jean-Pierre from France, who specialized in French and Arabic, Yuki from Japan, who handled Japanese and Korean, and Dmitry from Russia, who covered Russian and several Eastern European languages. They formed a tight-knit community, understanding the unique pressures and demands of their profession. The summit officially began on a Monday morning with opening ceremonies and speeches from various heads of state. Marina settled into her interpretation booth, adjusted her headphones, and prepared her notepad. The first speaker was the Secretary General of the United Nations, who delivered an inspiring speech about global cooperation and the urgent need for action on climate change. As Marina flawlessly interpreted the speech from English into Mandarin, she noticed something peculiar. Through her headphones, she could hear not only the official speeches being delivered into the microphones, but also the ambient sounds from the delegates' microphones when they forgot to mute them. Occasionally, she would catch snippets of side conversations, whispered comments, or background noises. At first, these were merely minor distractions, someone coughing, papers rustling, or brief exchanges about lunch plans. However, as the day progressed, Marina began to realize that many delegates, believing their comments were private, were speaking quite freely in their native languages to their aides and fellow delegates, apparently assuming that only the official interpreters in their specific language booths could understand them. The real revelation came during the afternoon session on trade agreements. The British delegate, Lord Pemberton, was delivering a passionate speech about the importance of fair trade practices and environmental standards in international commerce. His words were eloquent and principled, emphasizing the United Kingdom's commitment to ethical business practices. However, moments after finishing his speech and sitting down, Lord Pemberton leaned toward his aide and muttered in rapid French, a language he apparently didn't realize Marina understood. "Well, that should satisfy the environmental groups back home. Now we can focus on the real negotiations about reducing those pesticide regulations that are costing our agricultural sector millions." Marina's hand froze over her notepad. Had she really just heard what she thought she heard? The noble words about environmental protection were apparently just for public consumption, while the actual intention was quite different. She felt her face flush with the awkwardness of possessing this knowledge, but this was only the beginning. As the summit continued over the following days, Marina's multilingual abilities became both a blessing and a curse. She found herself inadvertently eavesdropping on dozens of private conversations, and what she heard was simultaneously fascinating, disturbing, and often hilarious. The German Chancellor's representative, a stern woman named Frau Weiss, spent an entire session on economic policy, whispering to her assistant in German about her obsession with a romantic novel series she was reading. "I don't care what the data says about inflation rates," she whispered during a particularly dry presentation on monetary policy. "I need to know if Klaus finally confesses his love to Greta in chapter 47. Check my e-reader during the lunch break." The Saudi Arabian delegate, Prince Khalid, who appeared very conservative and formal during official proceedings, could be heard speaking in Arabic to his younger cousin about his secret passion for American country music. "I have tickets to see Dolly Parton next month in Las Vegas," he whispered excitedly. "But we must tell Father I'm attending a banking conference." The Brazilian representative, Ambassador Silva, maintained an image of stern professionalism throughout the climate discussions, but was actually coordinating his daughter's wedding via whispered Portuguese phone calls during breaks. No, not the orchids. Tell the florist we want roses, pink roses, not red. And the band absolutely must know how to play samba properly. This is non-negotiable. These personal glimpses into the delegates' private lives were amusing, but Marina also overheard more serious matters that troubled her conscience. During a session on cybersecurity, she heard the Russian delegate, Ambassador Volkov, speaking in Russian to his technical advisor about plans to creatively interpret the cybersecurity protocols being discussed. "We agree to everything publicly, but our teams back in Moscow are already developing workarounds. The encryption standards they're proposing would never work with our current surveillance infrastructure." Similarly, during discussions about climate change commitments, Marina overheard the representative from a small oil-rich nation speaking in Arabic to his fellow delegates about how they had no intention of actually reducing their fossil fuel production. We sign whatever they want, make the promises, collect the good publicity, and then continue as before. These Western nations have been polluting for 200 years. Now they want to stop us from developing? Let them lecture us while we secure our economic future. The Canadian delegate, whom Marina had always admired for his progressive speeches about indigenous rights and environmental protection, was overheard speaking in French to his assistant about his investments in a mining company that was currently engaged in a bitter dispute with indigenous communities over land rights. Make sure those stock purchases are kept separate from my disclosure forms. We can't have any connection between my public position and my private investments. Marina felt increasingly burdened by the weight of all this secret knowledge. She hadn't intentionally eavesdropped. She was simply doing her job and happened to understand languages that people assumed were private codes. But what should she do with this information? Her professional code of ethics as an interpreter required absolute confidentiality. Everything she heard during her work was supposed to remain private, whether it was official statements or private conversations. Yet some of what she had heard suggested that important international agreements were being made in bad faith, that public promises were being undermined by private intentions. Didn't the public have a right to know that their representatives were not acting with integrity? But if she revealed what she knew, she would destroy her career and betray the fundamental trust that made her profession possible. The ethical dilemma kept Marina awake at night in her Geneva hotel room. She found herself constantly replaying the conversations in her mind, analyzing the implications, and wrestling with her conscience. On the third night of the summit, she decided to call her former mentor, Professor Elizabeth Hammond, who had taught her legal and ethical interpretation practices during her graduate studies. "Marina, my dear," Professor Hammond said, after listening to her former students' concerns, "you've stumbled into one of the most difficult ethical situations an interpreter can face. The truth is, there's no perfect answer. However, I would remind you of why our code of confidentiality exists. It's not primarily to protect the powerful, it's to enable honest communication. If diplomats and negotiators couldn't trust interpreters to maintain confidentiality, they would never speak freely, and genuine dialogue would become impossible. But what if maintaining that confidentiality means allowing deception?" Marina asked. "That's a question that goes far beyond interpretation," Professor Hammond replied. "That's a question about the nature of diplomacy itself. International relations have always involved a complex dance between public statements and private negotiations, between ideal positions and practical compromises. Your role is to facilitate communication, not to judge or police the content of that communication." The professor paused before continuing. "However, there are exceptions. If you hear something that suggests imminent harm, a plan to commit violence, for instance, or a conspiracy to commit crimes against humanity, then your obligation to prevent harm supersedes your professional confidentiality. But disagreements about policy, even cynical or hypocritical positions, don't typically reach that threshold." Marina thanked her mentor and ended the call, feeling somewhat reassured, but still troubled. She decided to focus on doing her job to the best of her ability, and to observe carefully what was actually happening beyond the surface theatrics of the summit. The fourth day of the conference brought an unexpected crisis that would test everything Marina had learned. The session was focused on a controversial proposal for international carbon taxes that would require all nations to pay fees based on their carbon emissions, with the revenue being used to fund renewable energy projects in developing nations. The debate was heated from the start. Developed nations argued that rapidly developing countries needed to take responsibility for their growing emissions. Developing nations countered that wealthy countries had built their prosperity through centuries of unrestricted pollution and now wanted to prevent others from developing in the same way. Small island nations, facing existential threats from rising sea levels, pleaded for immediate action, regardless of who was to blame. Marina was interpreting the remarks of the Chinese delegate, Minister Zhang, who was presenting a carefully balanced position that acknowledged China's emissions, while emphasizing the need for differentiated responsibilities based on historical contributions to climate change. His speech was diplomatic and measured, receiving polite applause from various quarters. However, immediately after finishing his speech, Minister Zhang turned off his microphone, or so he thought, and spoke to his aide in Mandarin. What he didn't realize was that the microphone button sometimes required a double tap to fully deactivate, and his words were being transmitted to the interpretation system. "These island nations are so dramatic," Minister Zhang said dismissively in Mandarin, acting as if the whole world needs to stop developing just because their beaches are getting wet. They should have thought about that before building everything at sea level. We have 800 million people to lift out of poverty. We can't let a few tiny islands dictate our energy policy. Marina's blood ran cold. She was interpreting live, and while Minister Zhang's comment wasn't being broadcast to the main floor in English, it was being transmitted through the Mandarin interpretation channel, which several delegates and their staff were monitoring to compare the original Chinese with their interpretation feeds. Within seconds, Marina saw several delegations suddenly become agitated. The delegate from Tuvalu, a small Pacific island nation that was literally drowning due to rising sea levels, stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. Other island nation representatives began conferring urgently with their colleagues. The room, which had been settling into a scheduled coffee break, suddenly crackled with tension. The situation escalated quickly. The Tuvaluan delegate demanded the floor and made an impassioned speech about the dismissive attitudes of larger nations toward the existential threats facing island communities. He didn't directly quote Minister Zhang's private comment. Apparently, most of the island nation delegates didn't understand Mandarin, but his timing and the intensity of his emotion made it clear that something had sparked this outburst. Minister Zhang looked genuinely confused, unaware that his private comment had been overheard. His confusion only made matters worse, as his apparent lack of understanding of why people were upset seemed to confirm the callousness of his private remarks. The French delegate, who had been monitoring the Mandarin feed and understood what had happened, stood up and asked for a point of order. "Mr. Chairman, I believe there may have been a technical issue with the interpretation system that has caused some unfortunate misunderstanding. Perhaps we should take our scheduled break now and investigate the matter." The session chairman, a veteran Swedish diplomat named Ambassador Lindström, quickly recognized that something significant had occurred and agreed to an extended break. As delegates filed out of the hall, Marina saw various groups forming, island nation representatives clustering together in solidarity, larger nation delegations hurrying to private meeting rooms, and technical staff rushing to check the interpretation equipment. Marina remained in her booth, her heart pounding. She knew exactly what had happened and felt responsible, even though she had done nothing wrong technically. She had simply been doing her job, interpreting what came through her system. The microphone malfunction wasn't her fault, and she certainly hadn't intentionally broadcast Minister Zhang's private comment. Her booth phone rang. It was Marcel, the chief interpreter coordinator. "Marina, can you come to the technical office immediately? We need to understand what happened with the Mandarin channel." In the technical office, Marina found a group of anxious-looking officials, technical staff, interpretation supervisors, and representatives from the summit's organizing committee. She explained what had happened. Minister Zhang's microphone had apparently remained partially active, and his private comment had been transmitted through the system. "Did you interpret his comment?" Marcel asked. "No," Marina replied. "He was speaking after his official speech had ended, and I recognized it as a private conversation. I wouldn't normally interpret personal remarks." But the audio was being transmitted to anyone monitoring the Mandarin feed directly. The technical director examined the equipment logs. It looks like there was indeed a microphone malfunction, a known issue with the double-tap deactivation that we thought we had fixed. This wasn't the interpreter's fault, but we have a diplomatic crisis developing. Over the next hour, Marina watched as various diplomatic backchannels sprang into action. Minister Zhang, once informed of what had happened, was genuinely mortified. Whatever his private opinions might have been, he recognized that having them broadcast had created a serious diplomatic incident. He immediately requested a private meeting with representatives from the island nations. Marina was asked to interpret for this meeting, which took place in a small conference room away from the main hall. It was one of the most uncomfortable interpreting assignments of her career. Minister Zhang, a proud man who was not accustomed to apologizing, had to explain his comments to a group of deeply offended delegates, whose nations were literally facing extinction due to rising sea levels. My remarks were inappropriate and insensitive, Minister Zhang said carefully in Mandarin, while Marina interpreted into English. They do not reflect China's official position or the respect we have for all nations, regardless of size. I spoke carelessly and allowed frustration about complex negotiations to cloud my judgment. I offer my sincere apologies. The lead delegate from Tuvalu, a dignified elderly man named Ambassador Sopoaga, listened carefully before responding. Minister Zhang, I appreciate your apology. However, I must tell you that what hurt most was not that you spoke these words privately. We know many powerful nations view us as insignificant, but that you apparently believe our concerns about survival are dramatic. My grandchildren's homes are flooding. We are not being dramatic. We are fighting for our existence. The meeting continued for over an hour, with Marina interpreting increasingly emotional exchanges. However, something unexpected happened as the conversation progressed. The crisis that had been sparked by Marina's inadvertent role in revealing private remarks became an opportunity for genuine dialogue. Minister Zhang, perhaps because he had been forced to confront the human reality of climate change rather than just abstract policy debates, began asking detailed questions about the specific impacts island nations were experiencing. Ambassador Sopoaga and his colleagues shared photographs, data, and personal stories. The tone shifted from confrontation to conversation, from anger to explanation. By the end of the meeting, Minister Zhang had committed to proposing a special fund specifically for climate adaptation in small island nations, something that went beyond what China had previously been willing to support. It wasn't a complete solution to the larger disagreements about carbon taxes and emissions responsibilities, but it was a meaningful gesture that helped repair the immediate damage. When Marina returned to her hotel that evening, she reflected on the strange turn of events. Her ability to understand multiple languages had inadvertently sparked a diplomatic crisis, but that crisis had ultimately led to a more honest conversation and potentially better outcomes. The accidental breach of privacy had forced people to confront realities that diplomatic language usually obscured. The final day of the summit brought more surprises. During the closing session, several delegates made unexpected announcements. The British delegation, apparently influenced by the previous day's events, announced a significant strengthening of their proposed environmental regulations, much stricter than Lord Pemberton's private comments had suggested they intended. Had someone informed him that his French aside had been overheard? Marina wasn't sure, but the change was notable. The Russian delegate, Ambassador Volkov, engaged in an unexpectedly frank discussion with the American delegation about cybersecurity concerns, acknowledging the tensions between national security interests and the need for international cooperation. It wasn't a complete reversal of the cynical approach Marina had overheard earlier, but it suggested that the crisis had prompted some reconsideration of positions. Even the delegate who had been coordinating his daughter's wedding managed to make a touching speech about the importance of protecting the world for future generations, apparently inspired by his daughter's upcoming marriage and the family he hoped she would someday have. The summit concluded with a comprehensive agreement that, while not perfect, represented genuine progress on several fronts. The carbon tax proposal was modified to include transition periods and special provisions for developing nations, while also establishing concrete commitments from wealthy nations to fund climate adaptation. Cybersecurity protocols were adopted with provisions for transparency and dispute resolution. Trade agreements included meaningful environmental and labor protections, though with more flexibility than environmental advocates had initially wanted. At the closing reception, Marina found herself approached by various delegates who wanted to thank her for her interpretation work. Ambassador Sopoaga, the representative from Tuvalu, shook her hand warmly. "Thank you for your professionalism throughout this summit, and especially during yesterday's difficult meeting. Good interpretation is about more than just translating words. It's about helping people truly understand each other." Minister Zhang also approached her, speaking in English this time. "I want to apologize if yesterday's incident caused you any professional difficulty. I hope you know that the situation was not your fault. In fact, I think perhaps it was, what's the English expression? A blessing in disguise? Sometimes we need to hear uncomfortable truths to make real progress." On her flight back to San Francisco, Marina thought about the strange arc of the summit. She had begun the week agonizing over the ethical dilemmas created by knowing too much, torn between professional confidentiality and the impulse to reveal deceptions she had witnessed. She had worried that her knowledge of multiple languages had given her an unfair advantage, or perhaps an unwelcome burden. But the unexpected crisis, the moment when private words became public through a technical malfunction she hadn't caused or intended, had taught her something important. The problem wasn't that she knew too much. The problem was that international diplomacy often involved too many layers of performance, too much distance between public statements and private intentions. The incident with Minister Zhang had forced a moment of authenticity, stripping away the diplomatic niceties to reveal real feelings and concerns. And while that moment had been uncomfortable and potentially damaging, it had also created an opening for genuine dialogue that led to better outcomes than might otherwise have been achieved. Marina realized that her role as an interpreter wasn't just about accurate translation of words. It was about facilitating genuine communication, and sometimes that meant navigating the complex space between what people said publicly and what they meant privately. Her gift for languages allowed her to understand those nuances, but wisdom meant knowing how and when to use that understanding. She also recognized that the ethical questions she had struggled with about confidentiality, transparency, and the public's right to know didn't have simple answers. Every situation required judgment, balancing competing values and considering broader consequences. The interpreter's code of confidentiality existed for good reasons, but so did the occasional need for transparency and honesty. Most importantly, Marina learned that people were more complicated than their public personas suggested. The delegates she had observed weren't simply cynical manipulators or noble idealists. They were human beings with multiple dimensions, capable of both selfishness and generosity, calculation and genuine concern. The British lord who made cynical comments about environmental regulations also had a daughter he loved and a constituency he felt responsible for. The Chinese minister who dismissed island nations' concerns could also be moved by direct human connection to change his position. As her plane descended toward San Francisco, Marina thought about her next assignment, a trade conference in Singapore in 3 weeks. She would continue to use her gift for languages in service of international dialogue, would continue to overhear private conversations in multiple languages, and would continue to reflect on the delicate, profound work she did, and would continue to navigate the ethical complexities of knowing things she wasn't supposed to know. But now she had a better understanding of her role and its responsibilities. She wasn't just a passive conduit for words traveling from one language to another. She was a guardian of communication itself, someone whose unique position gave her insights into the messy, complicated reality of how humans try to work together across linguistic and cultural divides. The interpreter who knew too much had learned that knowledge always comes with responsibility, but also with opportunity. The key was developing the wisdom to know the difference between secrets that protected necessary diplomatic space and secrets that enabled harmful deceptions, between privacy that facilitated honest negotiation and privacy that masked bad faith. Marina smiled as the plane touched down. She had survived her most challenging assignment and emerged with a deeper understanding of her profession and her place in the complex world of international relations. She was still the interpreter who knew too much, but now she also knew what to do with that knowledge. 3 months later, Marina received a letter from Ambassador Sopoaga of Tuvalu. His country had received the first disbursement from the Special Climate Adaptation Fund that Minister Zhang had proposed. Your work at the summit helped bridge not just languages, but the dangerous gaps between understanding and misunderstanding, between performance and authenticity, he wrote. You reminded us all that effective communication requires not just accurate translation, but courage, wisdom, and a commitment to truth. Marina kept that letter on her desk as a reminder of what her profession could achieve at its best. Not just the mechanical translation of words from one language to another, but the facilitation of genuine human understanding across all the barriers that divide us. She was an interpreter who knew too much, but in a world full of misunderstanding and mistrust, perhaps that was exactly what was needed.